Three, two, one. All right.
All right.
Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do for a living.
2 seconds. Test, check 1, 2. Okay. Okay. My name is Mike Vanasse. I am a student in the associate's program at New England Tech for video and audio production. Quarter 6. I'm just wrapping things up, and then I'm hoping to go back for my bachelor's. After that, well, I hope I get into a radio station somewhere. That's my long-term goal.
And you say you're a guitarist as well.
I've been playing guitar for about 6 years. I picked up the guitar when I was really little, and I didn't really catch on to it. But then when I got into, 11th grade, I started picking it up again. I started taking lessons, and I kind of just found like this new realm of possibilities where I could just mess around and do just about anything, whether that's what I love about it.
How did you get started playing the guitar?
I have to say the thing that inspired me to start was my dad. When I was really little, I will always remember him playing older music on the radio. It's part of why I'm inclined towards like the 80s, the 70s, the 60s. It's all because of him. And then he also used to, when he was in college, high school, he used to play in a band himself. And he had his own guitar. It's an Epiphone. It was an Epiphone FT-135. I have it right over there. It broke for a little while, but before that, I remember asking him to tune it when I was little, and he'd go through it. He'd go through tuning and everything. He'd play a couple chords and he'd hand it to me, and I'd just be plucking around at random strings, not knowing what I was doing. But looking back, it was probably one of the things that got me started.
What is the best kind of guitar you've played and why?
I've fooled around with a couple of guitars that I would consider great. Acoustic-wise, I've messed around with Taylors, in both realms, Ibanez. Electrically, I've messed around with Les Pauls, Gibson, bunch of different types. I'd have to say my favorite though is probably Epiphone, just because of the sound it gives off. Every guitar has its own unique kind of richness that it adds to a sound. Some add atrocity, but I mean I'm not gonna go there. I have to say the sound that the Epiphone brand produces is one of my favorites.
What is the worst kind of guitar you've played and why?
Easily a Squier Strat. Now, I don't have anything against Squier. I certainly don't have anything against Stratocasters. But it was my first guitar. It was one of those cheap $50 things you find at Toys R Us for beginners, and came with this crappy little box amp that was like this tall and that wide. It was like a quarter of the size of my current one, which is a Line 6 Spider 4. And while it does produce its own unique sound, I have to say, regardless of quality, regardless of the sound it produces, it just leaves something to be desired. It always goes out of tune. It's lightweight. It's just not my favorite.
Who is a musician inspires you to play the guitar?
A couple, actually. When I first started off, I'd be listening to like some of the solos that I'd hear in like 80s pieces. Ozzy Osbourne, his guitarist Zakk Wylde at the time, I think it was. Neil Schon, the guitarist from Journey. Richie Sambora, the guitarist from Bon Jovi. And then I kind of got more into it. I started looking at like people who emphasized on guitar rather than just, playing guitar in the background for a band. And I found a couple of bands that focused on guitar, a couple of guitarists that just kind of did their own thing. Igor Presnyakov, Joe Satriani, he was a good one. Who was that other one? Jim Greenanger. He was one of my favorite classical guitarists, and my all-time favorite is probably Mark Knopfler. He's the lead guitarist for Dire Straits, and a lot of the things I've heard revolve around similar chord shapes, but the what he's able to do with them is just incredible. You know, I'll see like the same chord shape, but I'll hear a different sound, and I'll just be like, wow, I never would have thought of that on my own.
What are some of the best advantages playing the guitar and why?
There are a couple advantages to it, depending on how you look at it. You know, if you look at it like rationally, beneficially, I would say that it increases dexterity of the fingers. I'm not sure, but I mean, it would be logical to. It would sound logical to me if someone walked up and told me that it helped prevent arthritis in the hands. I'm not really sure about that one. It's good for building up callus. It's good for kind of increasing your dexterity and ambidextrosity in both hands, because you've got two different hands doing two different things, and usually doing those two different things at the same or almost at the same time. So there's one bonus physically. Mentally, I'd say it kind of it certainly teaches you patience. It's not like someone just picks up the guitar and the next day they're wailing on it like Eddie Van Halen. It's a long process. It disciplines you. It teaches you patience, as long as you're not one of those people that's going to flip out and throw something across a room every time you miss one note. And overall, it's just a great way to express yourself. It can increase your confidence, and it can really just lift your mood if you know how to look at it properly.
For those wanting to learn to play the guitar, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I'd say start small. Don't go setting milestones that you can't reach. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Start off with simple things, chord shapes, scales. Master your pentatonic. I'd say, other than that, look at songs that are easy to play. Pick up a couple things that revolve around 2 or 3 chords. Nothing complicated like, I don't know, Satriani's Satch Boogie. Go easy. And the most important thing, practice, practice, practice. I can't emphasize how many people just get frustrated and give up when you sit down and you can try to figure something out. There are tutorials on YouTube. There are people you can ask these things to. You have the internet. You have books you can learn new chords from. You can learn entire songs from. So honestly, just practice. Be dedicated to your practice, and don't be afraid to look places for new things. Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone. That's one of the main things with learning any instrument, and pretty much life in general. Just step outside. Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone.
What is the hardest experience playing the guitar and why?
I have to say the hardest experience for me is going through a time when I can't play. There was one time I dislocated one of my fingers, and it hurt like hell, and I couldn't really play properly, and I had to wait till it healed before moving it around too much. And it was only a couple days, but it was one of the longest couple of days of my life. And then recently I've gotten rusty because school's had me so busy that I haven't been able to pick up the guitar very often. But other than that, I'd have to say really not much. I've bumped into a couple of things that, like, actually playing wise, kind of get on my nerves. Like, let's see, I'm trying to find a good example for you. Oh yeah, there was this one time I was playing, and I was on the high E. For people who don't know their guitar terminology, there are 6 strings on your standard guitar. They have 7-string ones, they have 12-string ones, but your traditional guitar has 6 strings, and it goes E, A, D, G, B, E. Now there's the low E, which is the bass note, and there's the high E, which is like the highest string on the guitar. That if you play openly, it's just is it 1 or 2 octaves above? I think it's 2 octaves above the bass E string. You'll have to forgive me if my knowledge on that is off. I'm not entirely familiar with my music theory. I'm working on that. But that string, that high E string, I was playing La Bamba, I think it was, and I was trying to learn the solo, and the first time I ever tried playing it, I was nailing it. You know, it was so easy. It's just running up and down a scale. But there's this one part where you speed pick and then you sweep up the neck. And when you do that, well, if your fingers aren't conditioned like mine weren't at the time, then you're going to slice your finger right open, and that's what happens. So, difficulty-wise, dealing with that without completely losing it was one of the things that I really hated.
What kind of songs do you like to record while playing the guitar, and why?
Honestly, anything. It can be in you can be in a heavy metal mood. You can be in a classical mood. You can just be in like a screw it, I'm gonna play something and hope it sounds good kind of mood. I have to say, when I'm with friends, I usually try to just play something positive and upbeat because I mean that's just the kind of person I am. You know, I try to convey my personality, my energy through the instrument that I'm playing, be it a guitar, be it a piano, it doesn't matter. It all depends on emotion for me. If I'm sad, then I'll play something a little sad, but I mean, I try to generally keep it upbeat. Otherwise, genre-wise, I'd say I like classic rock. I know a couple classical pieces that I really like, and just some older stuff you'll hear from movies, like dueling banjos from The Deliverance. That's just so much fun.
What type of mood do you like to be in when you play the guitar, and why?
It depends for me. Again, it's all about that output of energy. If I'm in a happy mood, then I'll be playing something happy. If I'm in a sad mood, I'll be playing something a little more depressing. But overall, I can be in any mood when I pick up the guitar. It doesn't really matter. I've never been so angry, so upset, so sad, or so depressed that I looked at the guitar and was just like, no, I'm not picking that up. Every single time, I'm just like, you know what? Let me see what I can do with this. And I kind of just pick it up and do my own thing, and the results vary.
Where do you like to be most when you play the guitar, and why?
By now, you must be drawing the conclusion that I'm not a very picky guy, because, again, my answer is probably going to be just about anywhere. I've picked up the guitar in my room, sat down, screwed around there. I've gone over to my buddy's house, set up my acoustic in front of a microphone, plugged in my electric to an M box connected to Pro Tools. It doesn't really matter for me. I've also I've been in a dusty old cabin at my high school. Just kind of got through with my work, had a lot of time to kill before I went back to the dorm, and I had my guitar sitting there right next to me, so I picked it up and started playing. And then there were other times that were more formal. My old high school would have parents' weekends because it was a boarding school. There was a time when the parents would come over, kind of catch up with the kids. Then the kids would go home, spend some time with their family, and throughout it, they would have these events. They would have speeches, they would have dinners, and they would also organize performances. They would have. I wasn't the only musician in my school. There was a drummer there. There were a couple of vocalists. There was, I think, 5 other guitarists that were there. I mean, it didn't really matter because a lot of them were trying to shoot for the same thing I was, which was not really to get myself out there, but just to do something I love to do for other people. And I would sometimes go up on stage and perform in front of like 200-300. No, that was what was the number? I think the biggest number I ever performed in front of was 250 people, and then the smallest one at a parents' weekend was about 100 people.
Do you prefer to play your guitar alone or with other people, and why?
That's a tough one. I am very outgoing. I like being around other people in general, and if I have a guitar with me, yeah, sure, why not spread some of the love and joy with music, you know? But I'll play on my own too, you know. I mean, if I ever get the urge to, if I ever hear a song, I'll just be like, oh hey, that'd be really cool to know how to play. Then sometimes I'll just be sitting in my room, my parents won't even be home, and I won't feel like going on Facebook, so I'll bring up YouTube, look up new songs, and just be like, oh hey, let's learn this. I'll reach over, grab my guitar, and just start experimenting. It's really something you can do anywhere at any time. It's just great.
What do you plan to do in the future as a guitarist?
Well, one of the reasons I'm coming to New England Tech is to familiarize myself with a little bit of audio editing software. I've already had a little bit of experience with Pro Tools. I'd like to build upon that in the future. And while I do hope to be a DJ on the radio, I would like to produce my own music, edit my own audio, kind of just get myself out there, you know. But overall, it's just something that I like to have, something that I don't get sick of.
How do you usually set up your guitars?
Well, it depends. When you're setting up an acoustic and you're on the go, then it's pretty much just make sure it's tuned, make sure the strap's on, make sure the strap's not going to fall off, because that just sucks. Make sure you have a pick, make sure your strings are in good shape, and go wild, my friend. But when you're setting up with an electric, it's a little more time consuming, but there's more you can do with it that way, because you're not just limited to like one type of sound. You can kind of toy around with the sounds on an electric amp and just kind of mess around with different styles of music that revolve around those sounds. So with the amp, you'd have to obviously plug the amp in, make sure it's set up, make sure it's not turned up all the way before you turn the damn thing on. I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. And you have to plug it into the guitar, you have to set the guitar sounds to how you want it, and then you still have to tune it. Some amps, like this one right here, line 6, come with tuners built in that you pick the string, and then it will flash between certain lights to tell you when it's in tune and when it's not.
Alright, last but not least, what are you most proud of as a guitarist and why?
Well, in the sense of just being a guitarist, I'd say that's enough for me. I mean, the one thing I love about music in general is that you can always do something new with it, whether it's coming up with something completely original on your own, or finding something that someone else did and being like, oh, hey, wonder if I can do something with this too. I'd have to say that's one of my favorite things about being a guitarist in general. But I mean, with regards to accomplishments, I did manage to learn Dire Straits' Sultans of Swing for one of those Parents Weekend events I told you about. And I was able to play through the entire thing. I had the parents up and clapping and everything. It was great. So that's probably the biggest accomplishment I can think of right now.